I say stem cells are the mothers of exosomes. So they are the ones that are able to detect what's going on in the environment. What do I need to put in a package? What kind of information do I need to send out? Because when I'm over here next to a liver cell versus when I'm over there next to a tendon, I may want to have different packages. So your DNA will have the intelligence to make packages that are relevant to what you want to accomplish. So when people use exosome products, which I do use, you are collecting these exosomes. There's a few different sources. Most of the time is collected from growing the cells in a culture medium in an incubator, and then you collect things that they kind of blindly secrete, right? Like, okay, I'm a cell, I'm living here, I produce these packages, but I don't, I'm not sure why, exactly how, but that's sort of what I do. And you get these massive amount of exosomes, but they're not targeted. They can still be very helpful. There's a lot of good information in there, but they're not as targeted. But if you put the cells in the body, first of all, the cells have a way of finding a place where they are needed. So they sense, right, the fact that they are the salmon, they have the ability to swim upstream and find where they're needed. And once they get it out of the blood vessel at the location that they want to be in, now you can secrete the packages exactly what the local tissue needs.
Hello, Dr. Kong. You are the president of Chara Health and the founder of the American Academy of Integrative Cell Therapy and a leading stem cell practitioner and educator at the forefront of this exciting field. So welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Richard. I'm really happy to be here with you.
So Dr. Kong, kind of starting at the beginning, so there's multiple types of stem cells, right? Stem cells reproduce and can create tissue. So what type of stem cells are there, and what type of stem cells do you use within your practice?
Um, there are a multitude types of stem cells ever since the first stem cell, which was the fertilized egg. So every time when a human life is conceived, that is the original stem cell for that individual. So from that stem cell going downward, the cells keep evolving, keep making slightly different version of itself, and then they will migrate and get to their different niches, and eventually they will become, through the evolution, they will become a tissue-specific stem cell. So that is the end stage of stem cell. Anywhere in between, they're all stem cells, but they're all different stem cells. So what it really means is that these cells have the potential to become something else that's not itself, but it also has the potential to renew itself. So it keeps its own population steady while growing other kinds of cells with more function. So that's what a stem cell is.
Okay, and so there's multiple types, and which type is it that you use in your clinic, and why that particular type?
So there are cell types and there are tissue sources. So these are two different aspects about where you get the cells. So cell types, there are mesenchymal stem cells, there are hematopoietic progenitor cells, and there are mononuclear cells. So these are cells with different functions. However, these cells can come from either adult, from your own body, or from somebody else, either an adult or from a very young source, such as the umbilical cord, which is obtained when the baby is born. So baby's healthy, and then you get the cord and placenta. You can extract cells from that. What I do in the clinic is I use umbilical cord sourced stem cells. So these are cells that are more primitive. They can secrete more growth factors with more neuroprotection. They have, just a longer lifespan, more generations left. They have wider potentials. And they also have lower chance of promoting cancer growth, like our own stem cells. So unfortunately, our own stem cells have reduced in that capability. So that's the reason why I'm choosing umbilical cord source stem cells. But within the umbilical cord, there are people who only use mesenchymal stem cells from the cord tissue. There are people who only use umbilical cord blood cells from the cord blood, which have rarely much mesenchymal stem cells, very, very few. So what I do is that I created a product that combine both. And now you have a lot of cells that are mesenchymal stem cells, which are great for tissue regeneration. They really coordinate this regeneration process in your body. But then we can also get all these uh, mononuclear cells and cord blood forming cells that's great for immune regulation, neuroprotection, and yeah, just forming more blood vessels. So these two can work together, and that's what I use in the clinic.
So diving into a little bit more detail. So if we have, so we can have like autologous stem cells, or we can have these,
Yes.
I think they're called allogenic. So why
Yeah.
is there no rejection risk with these very young stem cells?
I know, right? It's pretty amazing because when these cells are very young, they're more blank. So they're just they don't manifest the some of the genetic expressions. Then they are they're really not triggering anything in the recipient's body. However, when the cells get older, even if they're still a stem cell, you think the stem cell is a stem cell. No, a stem cell is not a stem cell. So when the same stem cell has been with you your entire life, it actually starts to change in its immaturity. So there's more chance of rejection. Just give you an example. When we do bone marrow transplant, perfectly matched bone marrow obtained from someone else to be given to the person that needs the bone marrow. Even if it's perfectly matched, there's a chance of rejection. But you can accomplish something very similar by doing cord blood transplantation. Cord blood composition is very similar to the bone marrow. So when the baby's born, that blood flowing through the cord that can be used for transplantation, just like all the use cases for the bone marrow. But even if it's a completely unmatched donor, given it to recipient, there's less chance of rejection than a perfectly matched adult to adult bone marrow. So that goes to show what happens when a person ages. It just gets more and more manifested. The cells manifest more of itself, and then there's much more chance of rejecting or triggering a rejection reaction.
So do we know what the mechanism is by which the stem cells are working their magic? So if I
Mm-hmm.
if I inject mesenchymal stem cells, right? So they're already partly differentiated from the original IP, pluripotent stem cell. So is it because that stem cell is generating new tissue, or it's releasing factors which cause my body to regenerate the tissue?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because 20 years ago, everybody was trying to use stem cell therapy in order to regenerate tissue. They think if I can just put the cells there, somehow the cells know to make new tissue. That's partially true and partially false. The research since then, over and over and over. So if you start reading research articles, it becomes a repetition because almost everybody says, well, we were testing to see if the new tissue was actually a descendant of the new cells we injected. But no, it's not. However, the new tissue was formed, but it's not from the cells that we gave the patient. It's actually a patient's own cells. So what we know is that these cells we injected into the patient's body were actually providing a signaling effect that is telling the local cells, the neighborhood, to wake up and start making new tissue. So now we know the effect is what's called what's it called? I'm blanking on the word, but it's basically a local environment effect,
Para,
not a
para,
tissue regeneration. Hmm?
paracline? Paracline?
Paracrine, thank you.
Paracline.
Yes,
That's
yeah, exactly. A paracrine effect. Yes.
okay.
So, however, um, there is a subgroup of cells within mesenchymal stem cells. So if we're just talking about mesenchymal stem cell, of course, there are all kinds of cells, but mesenchymal stem cells is the most popular at this point. They're easy to use, they're easy to grow, although in the clinic in the US, we don't use cells that have been grown. However, they're easy to grow. That's one reason for their popularity. And they produce this massive benefit and this global benefit. They found out between 1 to 3% of mesenchymal stem cells actually what's called Muse cell. So this is a special group of cell that actually can go to damaged areas and start to take up to basically in a way digest the bad cells and then be triggered by the DNA from these cells that are damaged. And then that will trigger them to become the local tissue. So yes, there's a subpopulation that can differentiate and become the local tissue. It's not the vast majority of why these cells work, but that is it does contribute because we have seen mesenchymal stem cells given to animals, humans, but animal studies is a little easier to know what tissue became what. Then they found, okay, so some or from these cells, they did stay and start to divide and become part of the tissue of the animal. So yes, there's subgroup that can do that.
Under normal circumstances, what do mesenchymal stem cells become? I mean, what kind of tissue would they normally form?
They're mostly known for becoming tissue of the mesoderm. So that's the three germ layer. So in the middle, mostly the muscles, bone, fat, tendons, so the connective tissue. That's
Right.
that's what they're known for.
That's what they. And so when they're injected, they do localize to various areas in the body, but then they release
Yeah.
these paracrine effects.
Yeah, they are attracted to inflammation and injury. And when they get to the area, so they're like a little, I think of them as kind of like a traveling tiny salmon, floating through blood. Initially, they're outside of the blood vessel and they're listening. It's like they're listening in within the wall of the vessel to see what's going on inside. And they hear certain signals or they smell certain signals. They squeeze themselves into the blood vessel and start to swim upstream. And they will find where the signal was strongest. And then they will get out of the blood vessel. And now they're going to start to secrete all kinds of signaling molecules. And those will trigger not only local repair, but triggering a reaction from your immune system. So they will release signals to change your immune response.
For me, feeling my best means being both focused and genuinely calm, pushing hard and operating at full capacity, but without the stress. A non negotiable part of this is keeping my magnesium at the optimum level. That's why I choose Magnesium Breakthrough from BiOptimizers. It helps me get deeper, better quality sleep and supports my body recovery after training, and I can stay calm and focused throughout the day. Why Magnesium Breakthrough? Most supplements contain only one or two types of magnesium, while Magnesium Breakthrough is the only full spectrum supplement that contains all 7 forms of magnesium your body needs in one capsule. If you want to try Magnesium Breakthrough, go to bioptimizers.com/modern and enter the promo code MODERN10 to get 10% off any order. They even offer a full 365-day money-back guarantee, so there's zero risk to trying it. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you will make sure your monthly supply is guaranteed. Thank you for your support. So one thing you kind of hinted at there was we don't expand stem cells in America. Could you talk about what the legal status is for stem cells and the FDA and their usage in clinics?
Yeah, so the FDA provided some kind of guidelines. So these are not legally binding. These are not laws. However, a lot of people get very scared about guidelines, and then they think that if they don't do it, they're breaking the law. But these are guidelines. We try to adhere to the guidelines. Okay. So the FDA says, we understand this is a whole new category of medicine, medical practice. The FDA can regulate the practice in medicine, of course, but they believe that if you're producing certain, you're processing tissue and you're producing certain product, if the product has been manipulated in any way, like you put enzymes in it, like you use collagenase to break down the collagen tissue matrix, or you use certain chemicals, or you start to grow the cells in the culture medium for, to achieve big numbers. Now they say that you have created a drug. Now you've introduced other factors. Now these are no longer the original tissue that you can use for tissue transplantation. Because if you had just used the tissue for transplantation, that is not under the purview of the FDA. They cannot regulate the practice of medicine. But the moment you start to change the cells, because when you grow the cells, the DNA can change, the DNA profile and expression can change. And we use enzymes, it can digest the surface receptors and chemicals, of course, it can change the cells. So now you're introducing all these unpredictable factors. And also, FDA says you have to use these cells for the same purpose of why the cells were in the body before. So whatever the cells were doing in the body before has to be what the cells is doing in the body after you transplant it. Of course, the cells decide what they do. The cells always do what they do. So, but the FDA, that's a point of contention. If they say that if you get cells from the fat, you can only put in the fat, that's their idea of this, how the cells work. The cells can work everywhere because we get the cells from the fat. It had nothing with to do with the fat. We're getting the cells because they were hovering the blood vessels that supplied the fat tissue, but they could be hovering the blood vessels anywhere. So if we're getting the mesenchymal stem cells from the fat, we don't care about the fat cells. We just want these mesenchymal stem cells from along the blood vessels, and we can get those out and put back in the body so they can be circulating the blood vessel and get in and out of the blood vessel. That's very similar to what they were doing in the body before. So now it's a point of contention. So if you have a very narrow definition of what the cells are doing, and you think that has to be in the same location, and that is just, to me, that's actually very, very myopic thinking. It's very backward. It's not taking into account really what the function of these cells are. But that's where things are at. However, if you have not manipulated cells, and if the doctor wants to use these cells for different purposes, as long as they don't make claims, then it's perfectly legal to provide the treatment, as long as there's safety, that there's the right safety precaution, right? You always want to make sure whatever you do is safe. But by law, you can give people stem cell therapy as long as you're not making claims and you are doing it ethically and safely.
Do you see any changes coming in that? Because stem cells seem such an exciting area. Do you see, like, and I see that it falls in between like whatever the medical regulator is and what the FDA is, because they're not a drug. But do you see any changes making it kind of easier in America?
Yes. I, well, what's interesting was that April 5th, 2025, so not even a month, right? It's not even 4 weeks. The head of CBER, which is a Center for Biologics, I think research, what is it? Center for Biologics, some kind of something about research. So that it's a governing agency for biologics, which would be stem cells, exosomes, PRP, like all these, biologics products. The head of it, uh, Mark Peters, he was basically let go. So he was asked to resign or he will be terminated. And he had been the head of it ever since I remember. So it's been at least, since I don't remember how long ago he went in, but at least since 2017. So it's been a long time, and the entire industry was controlled under, his guidance, and he's asked to leave. So that is a signal that things are changing. We don't know exactly how far we're gonna be changing it to. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Right. Yes. That does look interesting. Okay. I was going to ask about exosomes later, but I think now is actually probably a good time. So,
Mm-hmm.
so could you compare stem cells to
Mm-hmm.
exosomes? Because exosomes contain these same kind of messages and they can have rejuvenate, well, I don't know, rejuvenate, they can have health span effects when they're entered, young ones when they're put into the body. So, how would you compare stem cells with exosomes?
Yeah. Oh, I have to correct myself. So his name is Peter Marks. I got the two names always confused. Yeah, Peter Marks resigned. But you asked the question about stem cells and exosomes. Um, yeah, so a lot of people are, I think, confused and misguided because there's a big push in the industry to promote exosomes instead of stem cells. Initially, it was because the government was controlling stem cells much in a much more strict way. So people think that, oh, if I'm not using a cell and this is a acellular product, now I don't have to adhere to the same standard and I wouldn't be under the same scrutiny. So, not to mention, we know a lot of the actions of stem cells were exerted by the exosomes. However, we always have to remember exosomes are nanoparticles, and these are little packets that have really no life of its own, except that they contain powerful signals. So they're not self-directing. They're not, they don't contain any DNA to make anything new. These are packages. So it's like you have manufacturer, a factory, and then I'm sending out packages. So these are packages I'm sending out to the world to convey information. But if you think that you can replace the whole factory, and you are being very, very misguided, because I say stem cells are the mothers of exosomes. So they are the ones that are able to detect what's going on in the environment. What do I need to put in a package? What kind of information do I need to send out? Because when I'm over here next to a liver cell versus when I'm over there next to a tendon, I may want to have different packages. So your DNA will have the intelligence to make packages that are relevant to what you want to accomplish. So when people use exosome products, which I do use, you are collecting these exosomes. There's a few different sources. Most of the time is collected from growing the cells in a culture medium in an incubator, and then you collect things that they kind of blindly secrete, right? Like, okay, I'm a cell, I'm living here, I produce these packages, but I don't, not sure why, exactly how, but that's sort of what I do. And you get these massive amount of exosomes, but they're not targeted. They can still be very helpful. There's a lot of good information in there, but they're not as targeted. But if you put the cells in the body, first of all, the cells have a way of finding a place where they are needed. So they sense, right, the fact that they are the salmon, they have the ability to swim upstream and find where they're needed. And once they get it out of the blood vessel at the location that they want to be in, now you can secrete the packages exactly what the local tissue needs. And not just that, not just that stem cells use these exosomes to communicate, but stem cells also use other ways of communication that you just don't have in your exosomes, because exosomes is only about 50 to 200 nanometers of size spheres, but they're a lot bigger extracellular vesicles. And those are very important too, but that's not included in the exosome product. They are excluded. And also stem cells can secrete growth factors, just sending them out into the extracellular space. So they're not packaged into these vesicles. They can also shoot out mitochondria, and that can be either packaged or not packaged. They have all kinds of ways of, transmitting different mitochondria. So all these are things that exosomes cannot do. Why do I love exosomes as well? Because they're so easy to use. They are uh, they go across barriers very easily because they're nanoparticles. I can put it on skin and they get absorbed. I can put it onto your nasal membrane and they get taken up into your brain. But if I do cells, if I want cells on your face or in your nose, hoping the cells will get into your brain, I have to puncture your skin. And so that, is not as comfortable. So exosomes are very easy to use. It's very, very helpful. It's a nice tool to have. Also, they're highly anti-inflammatory. I often use it in patients with a lot of inflammation in the body, maybe sometimes inflammatory joint. Then we can put exosomes in there. Then you can quickly calm the inflammation. So there's a faster action than cells. So if you give cells time, they will secrete all these exosomes, but it takes time. So yeah, I think both are great, but you want to use them strategically. And exosomes are never going to replace stem cells because that's where we came from. That nothing can replace the DNA.
Cool. So stem, so thinking, kind of taking a step back, if we look at stem cells, so why do we use stem cells? What is the data? So in kind of preclinical trials or clinical trials, what have we seen when you use stem cells? Does it extend lifespan, health span?
Yeah, it does, which is super exciting. When I first came on the field, just, to make it a little bit more personal, the first lady I met who used stem cells, she had rheumatoid arthritis. She was so excited. She said, Joy, I got a stem cell infusion because I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I had so much pain and swelling in my body, and then they went away. And my fingers, even just the same day, it went back to the size, a normal size. She was given a ring by her grandma she could never wear, and now she was able to wear it again. And then she said, not to mention that my energy levels through the roof and my sex drive is through the roof. And I was like, wow, this sounds amazing. Sounds like a nice, it would be a good thing to put in my body. So that's when I thought, if it can do that much for her, I don't have anything that's uh wrong in a sense that anybody can tell, where I can tell. But if it can do that for her, I'm pretty sure it can do great things for me. But then I also wanted to read articles. And when I started reading research, they break down on what the cells do. So they actually discover these mechanisms of how the cells work. This is what your original question, how do these cells work? They're found to be highly anti-inflammatory. They help shift your immune system to a more balanced state, and they break down scar tissue. They promote new vasculature to form to nourish your tissue. They help fight microbes. They secrete antimicrobial peptides. They also salvage damaged tissue. So they're able to rescue things that don't have to die. Sometimes that, like in stroke, the areas that didn't get the blood supply cut off, oftentimes will necrose and die. And that's why stroke can be so devastating. But with the stem cells, they actually can reverse the signal to reverse that programmed cell death signal. At the same time, they can trigger programmed cell death when it encounters cancer cells. So they are anti-cancer. And so, these are the multitude of benefits. So that's why, and then of course the paracrine effect you're talking about, I forgot. The paracrine effect is triggering neighborhood, right? Giving signals to the neighbors cells on what to do, but at the same time triggering local stem cells. In every tissue of ours, there are stem cells that can become the exact local tissue cells. So the nature has a way to replenish itself. But if you don't give those cells the right signals, then there's no new regeneration. Now you're stuck in the diseased state. So these stem cells can trigger the local stem cells to come alive and make new, fresh, healthy cells.
So if somebody wanted to have stem cell therapy, so what does kind of getting practical, what does a protocol for stem cells look like? I mean, how do you dose them? What how is the dose measured? And yeah, how do you administer them?
Yeah. That definitely is the art of medicine. When we have these powerful signaling cells, where do you put them? If we're just talking about mesenchymal stem cells, and so there's systemic application that can help with people with all kinds of systemic issues. But even with local problems, let's say somebody has bad shoulder. If you just injured that shoulder recently, okay, we can help that shoulder locally. But if this is a chronic issue, now we have to figure out, why are you having a chronic issue? Because when you were a kid, if you had damaged your shoulder, it would be fixed pretty quickly. Things would have repaired in short, at least, in months, 6 months, things would have gone back to normal. You don't have a shoulder pain 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line. So there's something wrong why your body could not fix it. So in those situations, when it has become chronic, then we need to address your body as an environment. Now we can put in these cells to kind of optimize this regenerative potential within this environment. That's when, even with a patient with local joint issues, but if that has become chronic, we will do a IV infusion to address the full body's environment, and then we can do a local injection. For small joints, we don't need to do a local injection because they're very well perfused. So plenty of blood supply. Whatever I put in the blood is going to get to that joint. But if we're looking at very large joints, then we want to put some cells right in the joint just so that there are these regenerative elements in that joint. And then if we're looking at other issues, we can always put stem cells into a particular organ. Some organs I would not touch. I would definitely refer to a specialist. The eyes I would not touch. We can do IV, and I can also use some form of laser to attract cells to different organs, even including the eyes. So the laser treatment is therapeutic laser, very low level, so very low potential to cause any damage. Actually, they're therapeutic, so they have a lot of enhancement properties. So not only they can enhance your body's ability, your cells' energy level, but it can help the stem cells to be more potent, more active, and most importantly, well, more importantly, it can attract the cells to that area that I'm pointing the laser at. So it's kind of cool, right? Laser
Hmm.
focus, I'm focusing the cells on a particular area. So I will not inject into the brain, but I can shine light on the brain, right? Or I won't inject into someone's ovaries, but I can shine light in the ovarian area. So I can attract the cells to different organs. Yeah, or for brain, I can also use something to open up the blood-brain barrier first, and then I can do an IV infusion. Then more cells will get across the barrier and go into the brain. Or I can put exosomes into the nasal membrane, and that will be uptaken right into the brain. Of course, I can also inject stem cells into the nasal membrane, and that will also be taken up by the nerves to the brain. So there are many ways of accessing the different areas of the body.
And how is the dosing measured or calculated?
The dosing, of course, is based on what kind of cells you're using. If you're using mesenchymal stem cells versus just cord blood cells is different. Uh, Mesenchymal stem cells, usually you need less. The cord blood cells, the number tend to be a lot larger. They're not mesenchymal stem cells. They're mostly primitive immune cells. They're incredibly helpful, but you may need larger number. And if you expand the cells, start to grow the cells into big numbers, and then you take a little portion out of it to give it to somebody, you have lost a lot of the potency when you start to grow. The more generations you grow, the more potency you lose. So you may need a lot, but funny enough, even if you give a lot, you may have less benefit. I can show you a graph that when this study showed at 10 times the number of cells compared to the native MSC, so that means it's never been expanded, never been grown in culture. When you use expanded cells, but at 10 times the number, from 100,000 to 1 million cells, not only you are not increasing the benefit, you're actually decreasing the benefit. So now that you're right, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So you think I'm getting so much. I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm going to, Panama. I'm getting 200-300 million cells. And at your clinic, you only give me how many MICs? You give me 8 million, 10 million. Oh gosh, you can't compare to what I'm getting in Panama. Um, Unfortunately, my 2 million probably is worth uh, a lot more than 20 million over there, right? So you can't, it's kind of apples to oranges in a sense. So the dose depends on that. But in my clinic, we use body weight as one measure. That's what all the clinical studies have done, is to use body weight to determine the dosage. And then we also add some amount when a person's over the age of 65, because when a person's older, the regenerative potential has come down and you need more signals, more stimulation. And then when a person has a lot of illness, so severe health issues, it could be, any chronic issues, then we want to add a little bit more. So we adjust the dose according to this person's body weight and health condition.
So what kind of indications, what kind of illnesses can you use stem cells for, or perhaps do you use them for in your clinic?
Mm. Now you're trying to get me in trouble by
Uh,
saying what
oh.
I'm going to use it for. Maybe right, you're in
So
Hong
no,
Kong
no,
over
if you
there.
don't,
Maybe
all right, no, no, yeah. So I thought about that actually. Yeah. So
I'm
no,
just
if you
I'm just
we don't, if you
I'm
don't want to
pulling
answer,
your
that's
legs.
fine. Yeah. Oh, okay.
No, no, I get asked that all the time, but I just have to make it clear that I am not saying that stem cell therapy can treat any of these conditions, just like you cannot say any supplements can treat any condition, right? So it's the same thing. I don't care if you had a herb, that has been used for thousands of years. It's been good for something, but you can't say it. So it doesn't matter because it hasn't gone through FDA approval. So just that cleared, I always treat patients. I don't treat diseases. What I do is to give people something to elevate their body's ability to repair. So that's all I'm doing. And what have I seen as far as people with different conditions that come to me? I don't care what kind of weight. Of course, I care because I want to understand their disease mechanism and how to track their progress and understand, just maybe where to put the cells. However, the bottom line is I'm giving them something to supplement. And people who come to me have a very wide range of health issues, starting from autoimmune conditions, all kinds of autoimmune, incredible amount of evidence when it comes to stem cell therapy and autoimmune conditions. And then people with, so autoimmune, that's, including most famous rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis. So these are the most common. I've seen some more obscure ones
Yeah,
and
I
some
was
chemicals.
sorry.
Mhm.
I'm just. I mean, so my understanding of autoimmune is that the immune system is attacking the body.
Yes.
Your own. So how does stem cells like it? How do stem cells fix that? That they stop that process, that they kind of.
Yeah. One of the main functions is their immune regulating property. So they actually help shift the immune system from um, from the more inflammatory to a more anti-inflammatory state. So there's a balance between these two sides. So the stem cells are able to help the body make the shift. If you are overactive somehow, that's why this is so revolutionary. We're calling on intelligence here. So these cells are able to help the system to be less overactive. If your system is really weakened, and you can't fight infections, now the cells can help elevate your immune response and make you more effective. So that's the mysterious intelligence factor that we are still trying to understand. How do these cells know what to do? But
Mm.
that's one thing that they do is modulate the immune response. And then going on with the list of people who are coming to me with different conditions, brain diseases, very common. We are also known for helping with brain conditions, people with like Parkinson's, ALS, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, so MS, all these different major brain issues can they come to us, and then we help people with all kinds of musculoskeletal issues. That's the bread and butter. That's what most doctors do. A lot of doctors only focus on musculoskeletal issues. And to me, that's just, that's a fraction of what the cells can do. And when we utilize the systemic benefits, when using the cell's intelligence to travel and to get to places, now we are seeing benefits in patients with all kinds of heart diseases, with lung issues, including COPD, chemical injury, help people with renal conditions, renal failure, kidney failure, and liver cirrhosis or reproductive organ issues. So, yeah, just about, we've covered almost all the organs at our clinic, but research is still not fully caught up, although research evidence there has been a lot. That's why I teach a course where I categorize different research studies within different organ systems and disease categories. Now we can show people what kind of studies has been around for what particular condition. And yeah, so it's pretty inspiring to be in this field and being able to almost like be a generalist, but also a specialist at the same time. But the treatment is simple and elegant. Yeah.
It does make sense because essentially you're, I mean, most medicine is really letting your body heal itself. And the stem cell therapy is kind of supercharging our ability to heal ourselves. And so it seems like generalization would be so that would really work.
Yeah,
So do you have healthy people who come in for who just want to like boost their health span for longer? And how do you
absolutely.
treat them?
Yeah. So I'm our first patient. I'm the first longevity patient. We definitely, it's a smaller proportion because I think it's still, unfortunately, most people, they seek help when they're sick. I wish more people are seeking help before they get sick. So 90% of our patients actually are dealing with a major health issue, but 10 to 15% are doing pretty good and they would really like to continue to do good and hopefully even better. So we do have people who come in once usually every 3 to 6 months. We have somebody come in every 2 months. So on a regular basis for IV infusion or any injection they need to do. But if they're just doing upkeep, IV infusion is incredibly powerful. That is the major method for longevity. And when it comes to clinical observation, definitely everybody who has been doing regular IV stem cells, they all look at least 10 years younger than their age. That there are not that many of them who have done it for a longer period of time, for more than like 7, 8 years. But that's my observation. And for people who yeah, and people who even started later in life. I have a doctor who started when he was almost 80, and this has been what, over 6 years, and he's looking amazing. People think he looks in his 60s. And yeah, so it has the capability of allowing a person to live a longer and more youthful life. And it may take longer for us to get the research stats for humans, but we have some good evidence from animal studies when rats and mice only live for about 20 months. And then if you start giving them regular IV stem cells, usually between 2 to 4 weeks, every 2 to 4 weeks, they give them stem cells. And these animals, if you start in middle age and you give them the stem cells, young stem cells, they live about 30% longer. So the ones that got real stem cells live for about 30% longer, and they look much better. They look younger and act younger. And yeah, so even if you start them later in life, that to the point of equivalent to humans at 75 years of age. If you start giving them stem cells versus the ones that did not get the real stem cells, the ones that got stem cells lived for 3 times as long, as far as the time remaining from the time of experiment. Their time, that time that they are on Earth, is 3 times as long as the one that didn't get it. So yeah, and when they dissected their muscles and brain, they found out that all the parameters and the markers for aging actually was reversed. So that was pretty conclusive when you actually see on a cellular level that these cells basically acted as younger cells.
How? So you mentioned that they would come in like every 3 to 6 months. I mean, what would
Mhm.
you think is like the optimal protocol? Although I suppose it also depends on age. But just, I mean, how would you think about the optimal protocol for a longevity focused person?
I think every 3 to 6 months is a great protocol. When you were younger, maybe you do less. When you're older, you want to do more. Someone told me this lovely analogy that aging is like a roll of toilet paper, rolling a toilet paper, right? The longer you roll it, the faster it goes. So, um, yeah, so when it goes faster, when the aging process, and aging also goes stepwise. So there's some point that things accelerate and you may want to do more. But I think in general, I decided to do it every 3 months, and that's been 9 years. So definitely it made a difference. And um, I can see in my photos the big difference. That basically I'm brought back to a younger state. Yeah.
So do you look at any of the blood markers for your longevity clients, or in fact, or your own? And do you see a kind of a move to a more youthful state for those blood markers?
Um, there are, hmm, we do check certain markers, such as different reflective of metabolic health, organ function, reproductive health, so the hormones, etc. There are inflammation markers we can check, but the more popular way of checking the rate of aging will be some of these aging tests, biological age tests. Unfortunately, a lot of them are not accurate. I hate to say that because to the point where I've stopped recommending to my patients. However, now I actually just did a podcast interviewing the founder of this particular laboratory that they are using a different way of measuring your biological age, not using the biological clock, but actually measuring real epigenetic changes. And their lab tests seem to be a lot more accurate. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that does. Yeah, so if a test shows two different drastically different biological ages, when a person took in the morning versus in the evening, I would not trust this lab test. It just
Yeah.
you can't be aging that much in a day. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That is fair. So, what do you where do you see stem cell therapy going? I mean, it is so exciting, and I see both in the exosome field and in stem cell therapy, there's so much new work and there's so much promise. What do you see as coming?
Stem cell therapy is going to be a part of the language of modern medicine. Everybody's going to be talking about stem cell therapy, just like everybody's talking about, yeah, why don't you take some antibiotics? And you need antibiotics, you got an infection. So, like, if anytime you got sick, things are not balanced, well, someone is saying, hey, get some stem cells for God's sake. So it's just going to be part of what we do, and the price is going to come down. Everybody's going to have access. And there are going to be so many more ways of staying young as well, besides stem cells. And I don't like being a one-trick pony. I like learning new discoveries, new science. I think we are at an incredibly exciting time. So there are going to be other things on the horizon. We already have some really cool stuff going on. But stem cells is so elegant, and it's really tapping into the original intelligence, because we humans haven't been able to make a single cell, no matter how small the cell is. We don't know how. So there's something beyond this realm, at least at this point, of our understanding of the universe, that we don't know how to make this one thing that's life, that's so miraculous. So I think as maybe what now we can only borrow it. So we can borrow it. Maybe one day we'll break through. We'll come through the matrix and we'll get a better glimpse of the secret. But right now, I think we can tap into this intelligent design that came from somewhere that we don't know where, but we can borrow into that. And that can be part of the human existence. And that aging will become optional. You can choose to age or not to age. And really, I think we're actually here. And yeah, it's progressing, it's getting better, but we already have some powerful ways of doing that. And stem cell therapy definitely is one of the most profound ways to achieve that.
Yes, thank you. So, on that note, so where can people go if they want more information or if they're interested in a stem cell therapy?
Yes, I have a wealth of information on YouTube. I have a channel under Joy Kong MD. I go through different aspects of stem cell therapy, and yeah, there's just so much about it and so much to analyze. And then also my own website, joykongmd.com, if people are interested, because I have multiple things that I'm trying to do in the world. One is my own clinic in Los Angeles. It's called Chara Health. And then another is a stem cell distribution company where I made my own formulation, combining the different products from the umbilical cord. So we also send that to doctors all around the country. I have a skin cream called Chara Omni, and that is 100% natural with stem cells and peptides in it. And then I have a memoir called Tiger of Beijing, and also my academy, the one I founded to promote education in stem cell therapy. So everything is on that website, joykongmd.com. And then they can also contact me on Instagram, Dr.Joy_Kong. That's Kong.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Richard. It was a lovely conversation.